Hello and welcome back to the Moebius Chronicles. Today we take a look at Diventare Moebius, Becoming Moebius, a book which was released just a few months back by a small Italian publisher, but which is actually the translation of a French book which came out in 2019 called Jean Moebius, Les Lacs de Émeraudes. Pardon my approximate French pronunciation, but basically translates to From Gir to Moebius, the Emerald Lake. And since I don't speak French, but I do speak Italian, I was really happy to see this book finally published in a language that I could read. So I had to pick it up and show it to you. A collection of Moebius' early works ranging between 1953, when he was just 17 years old, and 1979. This book covers a more than 20 years period where we can witness his stylistic evolution. Most of you on this channel already know about the double identity of this author. By signing himself Gir, he brought the classic adventure comic strip to its graphic and narrative perfection through Blueberry, while under the pseudonym Moebius, he created an exclusive experimental style, giving free rein to his wildest imagination, strongly rooted in science fiction. His representations are now engraved in our collective imagination, but how does one become a giant, a legend of the art world? This book shows us his first steps with a fantastic collection of works which are almost never seen by the public, beginning from his early years where his artistic talent was still in its seed state, and continuing into when it bloomed and grew into the work that we all know today. The end of the book contains a really extensive 14-page long biography focused on this period, this 20-year period, touching in detail on his family, his influences, collaboration, technique, and highlights, of different nature. And I would love to go through all of it in detail for you, but that would make this video easily over an hour long. And given that we all have the attention span of a pigeon and very, very busy lives, I decided to spare you the pain and to keep it short and sweet, highlighting only the most crucial information. I hope you'll appreciate it. So, where do we begin? Well, born in 1938 in the eastern suburbs of Paris, Jean Giraud experienced a unique and challenging upbringing. His parents divorced when he was just 3 years old, and he was mostly raised by his grandparents and his mother Pauline, a woman with an adventurous streak and a strong, explosive temperament, which likely influenced Jean's free-spirited and rebellious nature. Jean's childhood is marked by relative freedom and a lack of strict academic discipline, which often leads him to bury his nose in books and magazines that his grandmother receives from the bourgeois families she works for while cleaning their homes. Often illustrated books which she attempts to copy with all the difficulties that we can imagine. His passion for drawing soon leads him to discover comics, initially with Spirou, Lucky Luke, Tintin, and by his early teens his attention turns to Pecos Bill, Alain Lefoudre, Superboy, Fantax, and Le Petit Duc. He's particularly fascinated by Jim Boom, the first French Western comic, but also by early science fiction, such as the Italian series Saturno contro la Terra, and obviously the Americans with Flash Gordon and Mandrake. As his mother starts talking about moving to Mexico, where a future husband awaits her, Jean Giraud enrolls in the Duperrey School of Applied Arts, starting his first artistic formative journey and meeting two students who were as passionate about comics as he was, Pat Mallet and the legendary Jean-Claude Mézières, forming a trio that will fuel and inspire them as they push each other's limits. It is here that Giraud starts advertising his skill, managing to publish his first work, the humorous series Franck et Jérémie, in February 1956, the one we just passed in the beginning of the book. He is just 17 years old, but Jean demonstrates a keen understanding of comic conventions and a talent for storytelling, with dynamic compositions, detailed backgrounds, and early glimpse of his signature humorous yet rebellious tone. Soon after completing his second year of studies, Jean travels to Mexico to join his mother, a chapter of his life that has a huge impact on him, as he undergoes a triple initiation, discovering bebop music, experimenting with marijuana, and beginning his sexual awakening. All experiences that happen on the backdrop of the Mexican desert, a presence that will mark and follow him for the rest of his life. And if you're interested in learning more about this stage of his life, please check out the video I did about his book 40 Days in Desert B, where I go more in depth into this chapter and how it influenced his work. I will leave the link in the description below. So Giraud's time in Mexico also introduces him to the eccentric magazine Mad, which features the works of artists like Will Elder, Harvey Kurtzman, Jack Davis, and Wallace Wood. The magazine's inventiveness and expressiveness and parodic humor are unlike anything he has seen in France, and this new stylistic exposure leaves a lasting impact on his work, particularly on his early Moebius creations for the magazine Hara-Kiri. As his 9 months in Mexico come to a close, Jean Giraud faces the reality of his impending military service, especially with the Algerian War on the horizon. So he returns to France to resume his work with a bunch of publications before embarking in 27 months of military service, both in Germany and Algeria. It is here, in these few months between 1957 and 58, that he works and releases titles such as The Bison King, When Pythias Galley Was Rowing Through the Pole, and the epic of Larsen and Nordenskjöld. More importantly, this is when he meets the legendary Joseph Ghislain, known as Jijé, who immediately sympathizes with Giraud, impressed by his technical skill already prominent at that young age. Back to his work, we bump into The Bison King, which still keeps Giraud in the familiar Western territory, but moves away from the caricature and comical approach of the ones we just saw in the beginning of the book. And the Jijé imprint is recognizable in the treatment of the shadows, the backgrounds are well finished, and the kinetic lines around objects and characters, which are typical in the comical genre, have practically disappeared. We also notice alternating use of color, where Giraud is experimenting with lightening the backgrounds and even eliminating color altogether, in opposition to the traditional rules of the time that required dark backgrounds instead. He will continue experimenting in subsequent stories, showing a clear improvement as demonstrated by the Emerald Lake story. The Epic of Larsen and Nordenskjöld, published in June 1958, shows again the experimentation with the backgrounds, this time mixing dark and light, as well as with introducing stronger, clean shading on the characters, which is typical of Jijé. A crucial presence for Giraud, who is happy to receive him as an apprentice as he returns from his military service. Jijé had seen numerous students pass through his studio, but none as talented as that Rimbaud of comics, as he calls him in the preface of this book, and immediately offers him the opportunity to ink his pencils. This is when Giraud realizes that comics are an industry before they are an art, and that one cannot devote too much time embellishing an image. The work with Jijé becomes a school of efficiency, requiring precision and speed of execution, which he quickly learns to use not just to mask his mistakes, but even to profit from them. Once the rationalized automatic aspect of this industry becomes internalized, Giraud is able to give free rein to his instinct and creativity without being restrained by the graphic aspect. Published in 1961, The Outlaw is clear proof of the progress made, showing Jijé's influence. This time, the postures, the shadows, the alternation of planes, and the sense of framing are clearly mastered. Bounty Hunters, instead, from 1967, shows him going back to the humorous strip, pulling everyday life elements to construct a story in the vein of Mad Magazine, which we mentioned before. Revisiting the Frank and Jérémie vibes, while also showing some clear Lucky Luke influences. As we turn the pages, we can see that Mad Magazine and its influence will keep coming back to him as he alternates more realistic comics to the satirical and comical ones. As I keep moving through these pages, it is also important to note that it is now that the Moebius name is born. When in 1963 an obscure satire magazine called Hara-Kiri, in a style reminiscent of Kurtzman's Mad Magazine, invites a new artist to make his entry. But finding the similarity of his initials with the Joseph Gillan uncomfortable, Jean Giraud chooses to sign his works for Hara-Kiri as Moebius, picking the name from the Robert A. Heinlein story All You Zombies, then published in the magazine Fiction as a sci-fi story where the protagonist paradoxically generates himself, which was actually adapted into a movie called Predestination in 2014, starring Ethan Hawke. Heinlein talks about the Ouroboros, the snake that bites its own tail. But it is likely that this citation, when choosing a pseudonym, reminded Jean Giraud of another science fiction story, Bright Star by Mark Clifton, reprinted in 1966 in the second series of the magazine, with the title Les Enfants de Moebius, The Children of Moebius, ripe with story elements that correspond more to his narrative style. But anyway, Moebius does 21 strips for Hara-Kiri between 1963 and 64, and then disappears for nearly a decade. And as we carry on through these pages, we move into his later work for the magazine Pilote instead, picking up in 1972, where we see how, despite his enjoyment in overlapping different styles, we witness him swing between realism and caricature, still searching for his voice. But it is a struggle that brings growth and change, something we clearly see in the wonderful Marie Curie story, which is, in my opinion, one of the highlights of this book, where he puts aside a shading in favor of the elegance and cleanliness of the lines, an obvious precursor to his signature clear line technique. The face of young Marie clearly foreshadows the female characters of Moebius in the Inkel and of Malvina, for example, in the Airtight Garage. Towards the end of the book, we keep seeing the style divergence closing, ending in the magnificent Wounded Knee from 1979, showing his mastery of the hatching technique, a perfect ending to this wonderful book. So, 20 years elapsed between the first page and the last, allowing us to appreciate the speed of progress and the breadth of skill of this author. A learning and growth process that has chosen multiple convoluted paths, but without which we would not have the Moebius we have today. The one which appears again in 1975, when he, the artist Druillet and the writer Jean-Pierre Dionnet create Métal Hurlant magazine and Les Humanoids Associés publishing. The path towards adult comics starts there, with the recognition from the art world now on the horizon, as Giraud had always hoped. So here you have it. I hope I managed to condense this book appropriately. It was not easy. There was a lot of content, a lot of text to go through. And of course, I had to leave out some parts to avoid dragging this video too much. But overall, a great book for hardcore fans with some real gems and a really extensive research and biographical work done here by the authors. I hope you enjoyed it. Please like it and hit subscribe if you want to get notified next time a video drops. And in the meanwhile, have a good day and catch you next time. Bye.